Yeah.
What was your name?
Elise.
Elise. Thank you, Elise. Okay, William and Elise have saved the day. Almost forgot to start recording, and a lot of people would have been very sad about that. Welcome, welcome. Find a seat somewhere, hopefully, where you can. So anyway, yeah. So just like you would, if you're in the virtual audience, just like you wouldn't do it here, have side conversations in the live audience. Just let's everyone give respect and attention to whoever's speaking. I want to thank Ed and Kristen, whose home this is, and who aren't here tonight because they had a family gathering that came up, so they couldn't be here. But always appreciate them whenever it's possible. They open this home up and have for years, so very grateful to them for that. And thanks to Janice Spangler, who also is out of town again, who I use her Zoom account. So grateful to her. She may be watching in Arizona, where she is now. And of course, thanks to Fiona for being here.
Thank you. I put in the wrong address. I had a scare. Oh, gosh, this is so typical. I put in the right
I do remember
address.
the last time I had you
Yes.
here.
Yes,
There was a little
where did
problem
I
too.
end up? Like at the top of the mountain?
I don't know. You ended up somewhere, but you did get here.
I have repented.
I just want to put a quick plug in. If you get the emails that I send out to announce these monthly gatherings, I posted something called Healing Holidays. And that's something that two amazing women friends and I are putting together. I put together, did it fairly short notice. And the first one's coming up this Monday, and then there's a follow-up in December, the first Monday in December. But it's a unique combination of mindfulness and music and play to help the holidays go down better. Because sometimes it's a difficult time, particularly if you're in a situation where you're in a faith transition, or you have family members that are causing issues, or you feel like you can't communicate, or it's just not resonating with you like it used to. So this would be a wonderful opportunity for you to get involved in that. And next month, I'm so grateful and really touched that when I reached out to Sam Brown, he was willing to have a gathering. Yeah, so we're going to have a gathering and talk about Jesus and grief and Kate. That's kind of all we've left it at this point. I've had Sam before and Kate, and she was alive, and both of them are just gorgeous people, and I'm sure they'll have some wonderful things to say. So we're going to do something different. Interestingly, I actually did a sacrament talk about a month ago in my home ward. I serve an African refugee branch, and somehow the bishop's a running buddy of mine for a number of years, and he's young enough that he's probably not smart enough not to ask someone like me to talk, but I had to do 8 minutes of meditations on Jesus. And it was a lovely, beautiful experience. And in thinking about beginning this, I thought about some musical numbers and actually tried to get a few. Didn't give them probably enough notice, but that didn't work out. And then I thought, I think we ought to start out with a meditation, because I know a lot of you, because the questions I got sent, there's some angst and there's some hard things that we're bearing right now, and that's a lot of reason why you're here. So if you'll close your eyes, get yourself comfortable. Some of you have done this kind of stuff before. Just kind of try to relax your body, get yourself in a position you can just be still for a minute or two. Welcome. See if you can find a seat somewhere, hopefully. Not, then you sit on the floor, I guess, in the back. So as your eyes are closed, start a deep breath in. Deep breath out. Slow deep breaths in and out. I want you to bring that awareness to that breath. Really one of the most critical things you depend on, right? That you don't even think about is the breath of life. As I speak, keep this rhythmic breathing going. And I want you to bring your awareness to your forehead and your eyes. I want you to feel them relax. Kuna Matata, no worries. You see a gentle smile of warmth and peacefulness on your lips. And as you keep breathing, keep smiling. As you imagine you're a bubble head and you bubble your head about in a slow and relaxed way. Feel free to move your head about, trying to relax that neck, the muscles in the neck. So go ahead and move your head. Now bring your head to rest. And now circle first your right shoulder and your left shoulder. Again, loosening and relaxing those muscles that tend to get stressed up over a day and over things that we think. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Smile with those peaceful eyes, heart. Feel into what brought you here tonight, in this moment. Feel those feelings. Maybe it was a desire to connect with others who have similar questions or frustrations. Maybe you feel angst and anxiety about your faith. Maybe you feel injured, that you've been injured, or are concerned about others who have been injured or are being injured. Think of your current beliefs, whatever they might be, and what you call truths. As I speak these next words, speak them to yourself with compassion. I see you. I hear you. I feel you. I hold you. Now imagine you are sitting in front of someone who you feel strongly at odds with. It could be a church leader, a politician, an activist, a family member, a friend, an enemy. You may think they are from another planet, that they are completely and utterly wrong, uninformed, or deluded. You may even consider them evil, but hopefully not. And I'm sitting in front of you, almost knee to knee, feeling as peaceful and open as you are, hopefully feeling now. Look them into their warm eyes with your warm eyes, and your kind smile with your kind smile. The same smile you held for yourself just a moment ago. Same compassion and feelings you held for yourself. And bring all that compassion that you can muster to bear on their behalf. And say with me to them, I see you. I hear you. I feel you. I hold you. This is what the luminous Jesus has asked us to do. This is the work of his discipleship. To see, hear, feel, and hold whoever that other is. I've asked Bob Sontag to offer us an opening prayer. Yeah, why don't you come up here? Just so I can make sure.
Our beloved Heavenly Father, we are so grateful tonight to be together in this space, and we ask a blessing on those who have offered their home. We ask that thou would bless those who have organized and volunteered their time and effort to put this gathering together. We are grateful for them, and we're grateful for a life that affords us time to be here. We ask a blessing on this space, that it can be a place of holiness where many gathered in thy name can receive thy presence. We ask that the grace and wisdom of our mother may be with us, that our hearts can be open in love toward one another and drawn out in love to thee. We ask that our hearts may be soft, that our ears can be quick to hear, and that our eyes can see what thou would have us see. We ask that we may be fit company this evening for angels to be among us, to uplift those who are weighed down and those who are struggling. We ask that those among us going through difficult times may find that you are accompanying them and walking with them. Please guide them. Please dispatch the host of heaven to accompany them as well. We ask a blessing on Fiona, who will speak to us tonight. Please guide her, and please fill her mouth with thy words and partner with her in our instruction and in a blessed and divine conversation. We ask for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bob. All right. I am going to get my list of questions that I winnowed out of what was sent me. And I love that Fiona is quick on her feet and that she's willing just to do this. I appreciate it very much. I did send these questions to her ahead of time.
Yes, you did. I'm very grateful.
So she wouldn't be sick.
Those of you who know me, you know that I am not a linear thinker, and so we could end up in all sorts of rush. So I actually wrote down notes. So I'm really grateful. It might actually be a pleasant evening for everybody. Where is she going now? Might not be asked too many times.
Well, yeah, and then you'll be able to survive your membership in the church too. I'd like to start out with a question from a friend of mine who serves in the church, this wonderful woman. She says, how do we navigate an increase of church leadership shutting down or othering those who come to worship, but with sincere concern, questions and doubts about many aspects of the institution? From Elder Corbett's recent address to chaplains in the service, he spoke of people like this as activists, even giving them an acronym, ATC-activism towards the church, saying that this is what Satan would want and part of his plan. It was so distressing to me to hear him talk, feeling like he is talking about me. What can a person do, and how can we still belong in a church we love when this is the dialogue from the top?
Is that my question?
That is your question. I ain't going to answer that question.
I think personally, I haven't seen an overwhelming shift in that direction. I think we do hear it. I'm not on any chat groups. I have no friends, very few, and as you know, I don't answer my email because I can't tell you.
Eventually you do.
Well, yeah, I do eventually, but usually people would like a response immediately. So that's why you and everybody else email Terrell. And so
True.
Terrell, can you please get Fiona?
Terrell's the one
to
that told me to
read
do that.
Yeah, so if anything is going to get, I know, I'm a bit behind, and I may very well be, behind in this as well. I will tell you what Terrell and I have noticed is an increase in rhetoric supporting a gentle, kind deity who is modeled in his son. We sent out our research assistants a while back and asked them if they could just go through conference talks and find out what has happened with the verb healing. Because we're noticing that there's been a real increase of this idea of woundedness rather than sin, and healing rather than saving. And maybe because we want to hear that, I'm not sure, but I feel we are hearing it. Is anybody else hearing it? Great, thanks. I'm not out of my mind. But and this for us is very important. So in the last decade, the words heal or healing have increased in general conference talks 500%. That is massive. That is a massive move. And I do feel it's not just our faith tradition. I feel other Christian faith traditions at any rate are also moving in this direction. And I find it very, very hopeful because I really do believe that if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And Christ spent his entire life healing the mentally, physically, and emotionally ill. That's really all he did. And if he is representative of the Father, then the Father can't be living on a different planet, working under a different system of wrath and vengefulness and punishment. It puts both the Father and the Son at odds with each other. I mean, they can't coexist. And so anyway, we really feel that this is a restoration church insofar as what we feel is being restored is the gospel according to the church fathers. So essentially the church fathers prior to Augustine, with Augustine, everything went rapidly downhill. We moved to a wrathful, vengeful God. We moved to hell. We moved to limited salvation, limited healing, and then Luther, Zwingli, and what's his name? The other one. Any, pardon? Luther and Zwingli. Yeah, yes, thank you. We're Augustine on crack. And it's unfortunate because they have been really, really influential in the American religious culture in particular. The English didn't like the Puritans, so they wanted to get rid of them. Australia was filling up. And so the British government sent them all west. West, we are west, yes. And so that sank deeply very early in American religious consciousness. And it's just now letting go of its stranglehold, we feel, but we are moving. So this is a long answer to that beautiful question. I remember, so I'm constantly in faith transition. I think it's actually a very good place to be. I mean, we don't want to be static, do we? And, so we're going to move forward and go back. And that's perfectly normal. If we are static, we are in stasis, then we have a problem. But I found this verse really disquieting from the time I first read it until it's just sort of been plaguing me. And it's the Old Testament verse where God is going to heap the sins of the fathers onto the third and fourth generation. And it's like, I'm not worshiping that God. I'm so sorry. I mean, if you've got issues with me, that's fine, but don't take it out on my children or my grandchildren. And now I'm a grandmother. I just came away from grandparenting. And it's like, but if we transition the language from sin to woundedness, And it's really interesting that Mary Douglas, who is, she was a theologian at Oxford, and a number of other scholars are looking more closely at the Hebrew text. And so the word kippur, which is generally translated as atonement, which requires some suffering on the part of the person doing the atonement, has been misread. And that actually kippur means to cover something, to cover a wound, particularly. And so when we shift from the emphasis of saving us from our sins to healing us from our wounds, I think we are also restoring a much more positive and accurate view of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And for me, I find it's exciting to be a part of the Restoration Church. That this happens, absolutely. And it is incredibly painful, but I find that I am particularly attuned to painful, which is why I generally sit on the bench closest to the exit, so that when I am triggered by certain vocabulary or concepts, I can run. And believe me, I have run from that space. But as a whole, I think generally speaking, I feel confident that we as a people and as an ecclesiastical church are making really fabulous ground in the direction in which we are being accompanied by many people. So it's nice that feeling that this is a global thing, not sticking out like sore thumbs.
A couple of things. Thank you, Fiona. That verse that you brought up in the Old Testament, I've always kind of interpreted it as a natural cause thing. In other words, the mistakes I've made with my children, I can see bearing fruit.
Yeah.
And they may, there's this concept that's very common now of ancestral trauma that we actually bear in our DNA from generation to generation.
I am so glad you brought
the science indicates that. So it occurs to me as we talk about this, that our church is this larger family of followers of Christ is suffering from a woundedness from errors of the past.
Absolutely.
Both from prophets and apostles and the membership. I know for many people in the church, it seems to feel from the leadership of the church, they do not like to kind of acknowledge that kind of framework that we are maybe in a difficult position. Maybe we're in a difficult position with the Blacks at one point and LGBTQ people now, and feminist issues because of how things were done in the past. And we carry that burden and are trying to transition. I'm not sure how to ask the question, but how do you see and interpret that? Is there room to have some grace for, I struggle with this because there's things that I would really love to see change in the church. Have the grace to hold where the leadership is now, in the hope of where it could be.
No, I think that's a brilliant question. And the fact is that we as a church have never had a golden age. We've always been struggling with either polygamy, racism, LGBTQ issues. There is always something
knocking at our door, right?
Absolutely, all the time. So we can't ever say that there has been a golden age, because we struggle with all sorts of things. I tend to resonate with voices in the quorum, and this is probably selfish, with whom I resonate, and there are those voices there. And I think time is, and we're Americans and we live in, I'm sort of half one. I've got a passport.
I'm glad you kept your accent.
And my family will completely disown me. Anyway, so time moves very, very quickly, but I think we don't understand how how rapid change can be disastrous and can be really injurious. So for example, earthquakes, tornadoes, volcanoes exploding. I mean, the trauma that comes with it's visceral, and it lasts, as you have said, for generations. I just wrote a paper for Illinois University Press on atonement and trauma, because there is so much being done now on the idea of both generational trauma and trauma that is being I mean, none of it. If anybody in here wants to put up their hand and confess the fact that they have no trauma, that they are not broken and that they are not wounded, exactly, we all are. And so for me, I have hope. I think there is time, and time moves on, and changes happen, and they may happen gradually, but I am convinced that they will happen, because they have happened, perhaps not as speedily as we would like to see our wounded friends and family rescued from their wounds, but it is coming. And for me, I feel that the support is essential. I tend to view the church as my local community. I can do much more in my local community than I can do in a grander level. Yeah, I can make friends. I can actually contribute to the growth of the congregation. And I think that's in and of itself inspired. Like, we're the only church that has designated parameters. I mean, we're stuck with that bishop. We are
Can't boot him out.
That neighbor, we're stuck with that statement. But there is a change. They're not going to be in there for life. I was raised Roman Catholic, and that has its issues too. So they don't. Anyway, so that was. Did I answer your question? See, I never do that.
It wasn't a very clear question, so I think you did fine.
Oh,
I think you did well. This next question, and again, these are things that I think most of us have experienced. I am particularly struggling with patriarchy. How do I attend a congregation every Sunday that believes patriarchy, and even worse, polygamy, are God's will and desired way of structuring his church? I want to stay. I want to raise my voice and make a difference. But since it is a woman's voice, it is easily brushed aside, ignored, or actively silenced. So thinking of that community that you're in, that you just talked about, talk about how this person feels in that community, who feels like they don't really have a voice when they want to contribute.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of us in that situation. But I have to say, can I grab this?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, is her entire congregation? I'm having
How do I attend
difficulty. A congregation every Sunday that believes patriarchy. Are there congregations who, uniformly, everybody? I don't know. I have to.
Well, we're living under that. I mean, we operate in the church under that, as I see it. Maybe you see it a different way. I haven't seen any women prophets or apostles yet,
no,
or bishops,
no,
or
not yet. But we are moving in that direction. In fact, this might be really a good idea to raise this.
Before you raise it, but just sit with that for a sec.
Yeah.
This is how a lot of my friends feel,
No.
and that's how I actually see. So
absolutely. Okay, let me answer this with a story that is similar. So I had a friend of mine, and this was years ago, and she was going through faith crisis. One of the early ones. She was quick to move in that direction. She's bright, and she had been incredibly wounded by a direction one of the apostles gave in a public forum. Anyway, she was struggling, and she had not borne her testimony for some time, and her bishop, and this is a very conservative ward in Salt Lake, so we know those wards. And the bishop had asked her if she would bear her testimony. So she stood up and she bore a testimony of, I don't know. I have not received revelation. I do not know that the church is true. I do not know that Joseph Smith is a prophet. I do not know, I do not know, I do not know. And then she fled. But the courage it took her to stand up and bear a testimony of, I don't know, when we've been trained to give a testimony of only I know, not I believe, not I think, but I know, was extraordinarily brave. What the reaction of the congregation was even more extraordinary. During the week that followed, she received text messages, emails, and phone calls from members in that congregation thanking her for her testimony and how powerfully they felt the Spirit as she spoke. So I think there is hope. It requires courage. And sometimes, quite frankly, when we speak up, we are slapped down. I think many of us have experienced that. Yes, we look at it. But I think of her when I want to raise my voice. It requires incredible courage, but it does make a difference. Now, maybe the response will not be uniformly as pleasant. We're talking about an old Salt Lake, really traditional Salt Lake. I think it was the ward that President Hinckley came to and said, "I know you, and you're not nice people." It was right before the.
I haven't heard that story.
Oh no! It was right before the Olympic Games, Winter Olympics. He was trying to encourage people to get involved, but that's how.
Interesting.
That's how he greeted the congregants of this ward. So. Not easy to live with or to worship with, but and I'm not so sure that a woman's voice is easily brushed aside. It can be. I was at the dentist yesterday, and there's this young woman who moved from Massachusetts, and she's not LDS, but she's really ticked that whenever she goes, so this is Heber Midway, whenever she goes to a restaurant, the server always turns to the man. And I haven't noticed that. And it's like, okay, now this is really bad news. But she said, you know, in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, the woman is always approached first. So, it is there, but a lot of it, and that's my concern actually with living in such a one religion dominated area, is that I will start adopting the culture and not notice these things. So she has a very legitimate question, your friend. And that is happening.
And so, I can hear friends saying, and it keeps happening, and it does happen partly because of the institution, how it does business, right? How it is run through a male-only priesthood.
Yeah, but
this is what so many of us wonder about and struggle with, and will that ever change? And in the meantime, how do people that are in, because the experiences can be all over the place, right?
Right.
I mean, Salt Lake has some really, I live in a quite liberal, progressive world, but there's parts that aren't, and there's parts of California that's super conservative. So I mean, it's kind of luck of the draw where you end up. True. I suppose. But the argument can also be made that institutionally there are things that kind of encourage and push that kind of a problem to happen.
True, but then I have to come up with this. Okay, so on March the 11th, 2021, there was a new international area organization advised Europe. And it says the Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints in Europe calls upon women to mentor congressional officers and participate in leadership councils. Area organizations will give instruction to church leaders and provide women's perspectives in all levels of councils. So we're talking about women in councils from the top to the bottom. They will also represent the primary young women and Relief Society organizations in their service. And these are women who are being called to these positions. So yes, I think here, and this refers to everybody outside of Canada and the US. I don't know what Canada did. but anyway, so yeah, but this is movement.
It is.
And it's
and I have seen movement.
Right.
I mean, there's pictures of women in the conference center now. When it started, it wasn't any.
Well,
but
true.
Because
true.
A friend of mine actually helped that change.
Yeah.
But so that's a good example of how we need men and women,
right,
who are, I would say, somewhat activist minded, despite other corporates talk, to speak up
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, and
Right,
make their,
right.
I don't know.
Well, it was Maxine Hanks who showed me that the ecclesiastical structure of the church is collaborative, or is designed to be collaborative. And we do have a way to go. I'd rather be alive than dead when all of this happens. But we are moving, and I have to hope for that. I mean, I had my massive faith crisis a number of years ago. When I joined the church, saying disowned by the family, that doesn't capture it. I wounded my family deeply, and they are still wounded. It was just unfathomable to them what I had done. And so I was vulnerable. And then after that, of course, I was researching polygamy, and that just blows the top off of everything. And I was really struggling, but it was a number of experiences that I had discovering the restored gospel within our sacred texts that helped me realize that our faith tradition has something to offer the world that has been lost. So we have this vulnerable God of Enoch, and in Jacob 5, which is an incredibly long chapter, and everybody falls asleep in these lengthy chapters, about verse 53. We need to switch on, sleep before then and then wake up, because that's when all of the great stuff starts happening. But it was terrible, and so this is gradual. And so we'd already written the book, The God Who Weeps, when Terrell came to me, and it was just quite recently, and said, Fiona, God has inverted the 2 great commandments in this chapter. He is not grieving because we do not worship him. He is grieving him that we are being unkind to each other. That is why he is weeping. And so then for me, the baptismal covenants took on much greater meaning, because I saw represented in those baptismal covenants all 3 members of the Godhead. So we're invited to mourn with those who mourn, which is the vulnerable God of Jacob 5 and Moses 7. We are invited to carry each other's burdens, which is Christ, all the way through his life into Gethsemane and Golgotha and onto Gethsemane. And then the God who comforts is God the Holy Spirit. And so for me, making that covenant, I feel that I have been invited into healing, into this divine process of their work and glory, of bringing to pass the immortality and eternal life of all humankind. Anyway, so I've wandered on, and you had a question.
Is it okay if we ask a question?
If it's related to kind of this part right now, yes.
So it goes back to the woman for her testimony.
Sure, yeah.
What I see.
Oh, wait, hold on, microphone.
It's quick.
Yeah, we want it to be heard, so.
All right. The tragedy that I feel is that those people who step forward to support that woman, I mean, there's something nice about that. The tragedy is that they sat there and didn't support her vocally. I mean, they'll sit in a class with her and listen. And
Europe.
No,
It's never me.
we lost connection for a second.
But so I think and as a people. And so, yes, I think it's really unfortunate. And we are in that really precarious period where people do stand up and are shot down often by women. And this is the tragedy. And so, and you know, because we have this pervasive support of patriarchy, even though they're so inured to the fact that there is this tradition in our church that they're frightened when somebody comes out. I mean, it does. Courage to the women who are standing up. Just understand that we may be fired upon by friendly fire. And that, I think, is where the real injury is, because and from my experience in the church, that's generally, so when The God Who Weeps was published, the woman who was the Relief Society stake president, Relief Society president of the stake at the time, came up to me and she said, Fiona, this is extraordinary. Your ideas were published by Deseret Book. Yours in terror. We thought you were mad. So, I mean, thanks for being generous and honest. But do you see what I mean? It was, even then, it registered well, but obviously what I've been saying in Relief Society registered ill with a number of the women. So that's rather.
You know, I can remember in my own faith journey how things that seem very commonsensical and heartfelt and true now scared the hell out of me in the day, and I thought were not anything a part of the gospel, which, as I reflect on that, it helps give me compassion for those who don't see it my way, because I didn't see it their way once either, you know, and I had some of those fears and reservations at times around certain ideas and thoughts.
We need more.
So that has helped me. that has helped me. Here's something that you kind of touched on earlier, because you talked about the larger Christian church, besides ours, shifting in some ways. And so this person says, as someone that identifies as an ecumenical universal Christian, how can I feel less discomfort and frustration around our intense focus on the temple and the covenant path? I've had that same, as I've tried to think about, boy, we are just really, I mean, we're investing so much time and energy and voice to covenant path and the temple. What does that mean? What's going on there?
No, I understand, but I think it helps to actually look at what other people outside of our tradition are saying about our temple worship. So we have the theologian who was the dean of Harvard Divinity School, Christa Stendhal, who said that he had holy envy for what we were doing in the temples, because essentially what we are doing, pictures aside, but what we are doing is sealing the entire human family. And he saw that. Now, Terrell, there's an interesting experience that Terrell had. So it was years ago now, but a woman had managed to put the Holocaust victim's name through the temple, and at least the baptism was performed. Well, of course, this hit the media, and you know, the Jewish population naturally was up in arms. And so he was invited by a Philadelphia talk show host to come onto his program. And Terrell did not realize that the man was Jewish. So the first question he asked Terrell is, what on earth do you think you are doing baptizing Jews? And I thought Terrell, and he does this all the time, he's so brilliant on his feet, so we have to have opposites in marriage, right? But that man,
I think you did.
You know, on a spur could be just so eloquent. So he responded by saying, our view as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is that there is going to be a massive banquet at the end of time, to which everybody is invited. Our job is to put people on the invitation list so we can hand out the invitations. And the host's response was, what a beautiful idea. Can I get myself on that invitation list? I mean, it's lovely because you might not come. You might say, no, not really. It's not for me. You're not serving the right food or whatever it is. Don't have enough wine.
It's not kosher.
That too. But this idea, so it's helped me to remove myself and to be quite honest. I mean, I'm old. So I have been through the temple when we were in Crusader mode.
I remember that.
Yeah, and that was fine with me because I was raised Catholic. It's like, wow, this resonates. I know all about this. and then through all of the different changes, and we are at a point now where a woman has a voice and a very strong voice. And so for me, you know, it's been helpful moving through these iterations of the endowment. I tend to do endowments more than the other, but I'm assuming the changes being done there. But there is this movement. So having been a Catholic, I can say this, and all of my friends who are Catholic just call me lapsed, which is just lovely. But after 2,000 years, the Catholic Church could say that perhaps unbaptized infants might not burn forever in hell. After 2,000 years, you can come up with perhaps the innocent won't burn in hell. It's like, so, you know, I think we're moving at light speed. So yes, there are.
That's a lovely perspective.
I know, but you know, I understand the frustration. I really do. But we are moving, and in that I find comfort.
Do you think it's just difficult to, I mean, because there's cultural tradition tied to what we think are directly given, inspired things in the temple. And so all that you say is lovely, but I'm not sure if, you know, I can speak for myself, if I feel all that loveliness as I go through. You know, the last time I think it was a few months ago, but and I like you, I've seen drastic improvement, but it's like in my mind, we still have miles and miles to go to where it would be a place where people could deeply feel, and where somehow we've divorced ourselves from the polygamy component of it that it was somewhat grounded in, and can just, I don't know, make it a place where what you said earlier, we get the order of the first two commandments right, where we walk out of there with just bursting to love one another.
No, and to be quite honest, I don't think we're going to get that in the temple. We're going to get that in our communities. I don't think the temple is there. The ordinance of the temple aren't to provide that. And I think most of us know that the endowment, at any rate, is based on Masonic ritual to a great deal, you know, because I think there was, you know, I'm worried about how inspired this is, but that doesn't bother me because that's how Joseph could express things he could not otherwise express. That's how he could, you know, implement something that is universal, that emphasized that a global Zion rather than individuated Zion, with which we've been living for quite a long time in our culture. But so, you know, and I've often heard comments about that, you know, it's a Masonic ritual, and it's like, that's fine. You use what you have. And that was what Joseph had to hand. He was a Mason. So, you know, I do agree. I might not say that, but
tread carefully.
No, I'm hearing Terrell. Tread carefully. So look at it. But I do think there has been movement. I agree with you. You know, for those of us who have, it does feel endless. But then, you know, I think of God, he is endless. I don't think he's worried about time. He's not worried about time in the same way we are. And I think working on a level, he wants to keep that tent as wide as possible. And I love what you said about in the meditation. So imagine you are sitting opposite someone who has wounded you really deeply. And we can all think of at least one. And then understand that God is working to help us come to that point. But it's going to take time. It's going to take eons. And he's fine with working with that. We're just not. It's American culture. It's like, want it now, now, yesterday, preferably.
It's true.
It's like you, Fiona, it's been 2 hours. Why haven't you emailed me back?
I did not say that.
No, and I'm exaggerating on my behalf.
Fiona, just along this line, because
Microphone.
you know.
Yes, thank you. Who's got? Thanks, Giles. Yeah, make sure you get the microphone. Thanks.
Because I love the power of ritual. I really do. And one I've had a whole lifetime of learning about. But in all the learning, it's never imbued it with inherent truth. Ritual is a practice that leads to the insight and leads to things. Do you see that any possible way to have dual teaching and dual conversation in the church of both the power of transactional work, ritual work, sacrament, attending, reading, the covenant path work, that, you know, the to-do list, side by side with conversations and instruction about transformative work, which the practice can lead to, just like meditation leads to that. But the problem is, so often it's only emphasized, or as human beings, we only look at the to-do list because the transformational work is not a textbook. It's deeply individual. It's the shadow work. It's the hard work. It's the trench work. It's the wounded work. Do you see a way that even on an official level, because I see this happening on personal levels, but in any official way, having dual conversations about maybe the covenant path conversations, whatever the marketing firm labels it, along with covenant relationship action, the transformative along with the transactional, so that the faith journey things are not bad. They're embraced and walked with instead of shunned.
That's brilliant, Jodie. And I do see that happening. I feel that it is happening, and in incredible ways. So this has not exactly to do with what you're saying, but I'm just saying that we can definitely change that paradigm, and I think we are moving toward it. So everybody remembers the talk that Elder Holland gave earlier this year, right? I don't even need to talk about the muskets. But I think what happens, at least it does to me, maybe you're more generous than I, but generally if I read something or hear something that is injurious in some way, I probably won't, it'll take me a while to read something again by that same speaker. Well, about that time, Elder Holland gave another talk at BYU, and it was extraordinary. And I want to quote from it because this is time changing. This is paradigm shifting.
Is that the one you gave me that I put on the website?
Yeah, did you? About destroy?
Well, you gave me a talk by him.
Oh, I did.
Posted it on the website.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can't find my notes, which is really annoying because I really actually need to quote him exactly. But essentially, he said, God does not destroy. It is not in his nature so to do. That is paradigm shifting. Because what that's immediately done for me is I don't have to read most of the Old Testament anymore. And then also there are some disconcerting passages in the Book of Mormon. But then again, when that is paradigm shifting. So I think it is somehow related to what you're saying, is can we put the ritual and can we put the depth, the transformative together? And I think in these paradigm shifting moments, it becomes more real to me, because that is mind blowing. It blew my mind, what he said. I mean, it's not that God doesn't choose. It's not in his nature to destroy. And so that helps me with exactly what you're saying. So I am hopeful. I am optimistic that we can meld the two. And I think we're moving in that direction, albeit slowly. But I'm optimistic. I think our faith tradition has an incredible amount going for it. I think there's a lot we don't realize is really radical, and so, within our scriptural texts. But I really do think that once we are able to do exactly what you said, that we will become a church that is able, a body that is able to transform.
You want to talk more about that? Because one of the questions is why remain, and you're one that is very inclusive of other Christian faiths or other faiths in general. Why remain a Latter-day Saint rather than a member of any other Christian denomination? Why organize religion at all when it seems so often to lead to problems?
No, that's a brilliant question. And, I just think we have to choose. I really do. I don't think God thinks any ill of us, of stepping away. His love is not transactional. It does not waver. And I think there comes a time when the pain is overwhelming and one needs a break. And I've seen this, and I think it's important. Sometimes the tradition we are living is too injurious. So, for example, my mom is Irish Catholic, and so is my aunt. And they went to Mass every Sunday. And then it broke. And it continued to break and continued to break. And my aunt and my mom responded in two different ways. My mom stopped attending church. My aunt continued to go. I think those were two equally valid responses to that situation. So for me, it is important for me to attend Mass. And this, you will laugh. Okay, so last Easter, I was in a really bad place. And I thought, I need to go to Mass. So I drove down to the church in Salt Lake, which is called Church of the Madeleine. And there are pictures of Mary Magdalene everywhere. But you will laugh. The bishop was there, and he gave, there are two versions of Christ and Mary Magdalene in the New Testament. One is that Christ appeared to her first, and she essentially became the apostle of the resurrection, and he sent her off. And the other one is none of the above. Guess which one he chose? None of the above. None of the above.
Oh, gosh.
And I go, oh my God, this is
Why am I here?
basic.
Where can I go?
So I'm just, I think because we are so ignored in our faith tradition, I mean, it really is a daily thing. It's a daily practice being involved in our community. The fact that, we have these divisions, geographical divisions that actually are not dividing, they're uniting. So we are with people we would rather not be. It's a good thing. It's a really, really good thing. I grew up very spoiled, and I never heard of the word service, ever. I was served, but I just didn't think it was a reciprocal thing, so I just didn't do it. And then I joined the church, and Steve Lund happened to be he was in the army, happened to be the, stake young adult leader or whatever. Just a charming, lovely man. Anyway, I was the sort of person that if I felt happy, then everybody had to feel happy. And if I was sad and depressed, then everybody had to feel that, right? Right. Everybody had to share in Fiona's life. And so he invited me onto the dance floor and he danced and we danced. And it was just so beautiful. He said, okay, so Fiona, I find that when I am down, when I'm depressed, that my mood lightens when I do something for someone else. Just phenomenal. What a paradigm shift. Like, really? Should I try this? Oh my goodness. I can tell you the gospel on which my children were raised was that service, do. And I have been served by my LDS community in ways I know that I wouldn't have been served in another faith tradition. So sisters from my ward coming every day of the week for a month to pick up my children, take them home because I had developed thrombophlebitis and the doctor said you were on bed rest for a month, and lovingly and kindly. And it was just so interesting because we also happened to have two very good friends, not of our faith tradition. And Terrell wasn't going to be home. He had a meeting, I think, one afternoon on the weekend. So he asked our friends if they would consider just playing with the children for that afternoon, because he wouldn't be able to be there. And you know what the response was? I can't believe that you presumed upon our relationship to ask me such a favor and such a question. Can you ever imagine a member of the church, our church, responding that way? So we've had lots of experience, and I am going on, am I not?
No,
Why were we?
well, no, I wanted to hear why out of all, I mean, particularly with your circumstances coming from a, very old and beautiful tradition.
It
of the
is
Catholic faith,
beautiful.
but like ours and probably any church out there has also done a bit of harm and continues to do a bit of harm. And, I have friends that ask, so how can I, let's say, some of them have LGBTQ kids, and how can I still sit in and support that space when it's, caused harm? I mean, even to the point of death. How do you sit with that with someone? And because I'm sure you have friends that have also said that to you. How do you? In other words, it's working well for you, and it works, reasonably well for
now.
me. But I also see how it hasn't worked for me and my children in different ways, not always, but different ways, or my wife or friends. And sometimes they just look at me like, how do you invest your time and energy into this?
No, you're absolutely
How do you
right.
justify that? So how would you answer that question?
Well, when I was really struggling with my faith, I was very fortunate in being able to, revelatory experiences, I would say, with scriptural texts with which I had been thus far unfamiliar. And that saved me, because it was essentially, how do I justify raising my children in this tradition? And how can I stay? And it was those things with paradigm shift. It's like, there is no other Christian sacred text, at least to my knowledge, that calls God vulnerable. In fact, I was reading an article just yesterday, and he was furious. I think we could probably be called Marcionites as well, but of the fact of anybody attempting to relieve Christianity of a transactional love with God and of a deserving punishment. And it occurred to me that in our sacred texts, at any rate, it is categorically written down. And it came to pass that the Lord of the vineyard wept. And this is him breaking down. Because until then he's been grieving, but then this is a breakdown. And then in Moses 7, Enoch is not asking a rhetorical question. He wants to know how it is possible for you, God, who exists from ages to ages, can weep. How is it possible? And then God responds with, you have this whole thing in between, but his final response is, wherefore should not the heavens weep, seeing these my children suffer? Yeah, and I'm not seeing that in any other religious text. And I will grab onto something that it may be only in 2 texts, but it's there. And it defines who God is, and it defines who I am. And then suddenly there was no complication in my relationship with God. I didn't have to be fearful. It was, he is a suffering God. And we haven't had that in any Christian tradition for ages. And I think there's a lot of hoopla, the fact that we do. That's okay, I can live with that.
And when you speak of God, I mean, we know you as someone who has an appreciation for the feminine side of God, our heavenly parents.
Brilliantly tactful. Oh my word! Where were you when I was
and a mother in heaven. So I know when you speak of God, and this is how I speak of God, and I say they instead of he when I speak or write, which probably isn't kosher. Do you think that, so one of the questions was, do you think that ever will become kosher?
Oh,
that
no.
we can,
absolutely,
that it'll be just,
yeah.
I mean, it can be interchangeable, that we
Yeah.
might even hear in conference, that when we pray, as I do, that I can say heavenly parents and not worry about any repercussions. Again, is this one of those time things that takes tradition, time, takes the DNA to bleed out and new DNA to be built in to hold that kind of space?
Perhaps, but we are, as far as I know, we're the only Christian tradition that has an essay that states categorically that Heavenly Mother, the idea of Heavenly Mother, is crucial to our doctrine. And so, I mean, it's there, black and white. So I think there are some things that need to be understood. And it's one of our core doctrines. It will eventually manifest itself when the time is right. And that's what I love about God. And speaking of God as, combined, is that God will not coerce. He will not force. And so he waits. And in time, we've watched this in our church. In time, extraordinary things have happened, which have not happened or been vehemently opposed in other Christian traditions. So
And when
I live hopefully.
When we talk about that, we could say so many of those things happened not because there was a pillar of light that came down and said, these are the commandments, this is what you need to do now, right? But because, at least historically from what I've read, whether it's the blacks and the priesthood, I mean, there's this impetus, this groundswell of hearts and minds moving a certain direction. And at the time, for often leaders of the church, it feels counter to God's will, and yet it becomes God's will. And I know for some people, they're going, well, what the heck? I thought these people were called of God to lay down the law, and this is the way it goes. So how do you respond?
Well, I think idolatry is universal. And
did you say adultery or idolatry? Just want to make sure. That people heard it. There's idolatry. I mean, the other is too.
But I think there is an unfortunate tendency, because we don't see Christ, and this is universal, to place someone in his stead. And this happens everywhere. And we're warned against that, but it is a natural occurrence. That that being said, what was your question, Jay? What were you saying? Now I've forgotten. See, look,
No,
I've
no, you
lost.
did fine. So
Oh,
I'm just saying that, it can be difficult to hold the space of that these are called to lead and set down doctrine and things, and yet it feels like at times, historically, as we look back,
Right.
that they are
Yeah.
behind what God is trying to actually come
No.
across, and it comes
Yeah.
through a groundswell
Right.
of the members of the church, and
Right,
even
right.
outside, not even members of the church. I
Right.
mean, sometimes,
Right.
often, people
Mhm.
outside our church.
Yeah, I think, and I will say for myself, I need to be more generous. I lack generosity
For
for fallibility in places where I think it should not be. And that's really wrong-headed. That's wrong thinking to think.
but
that,
you're taught that in a great sense.
well, yes, but it is true.
So-
But I think it's important for me to distinguish between culture
Mhm.
and what is the restored gospel. And sometimes they could be, well, a lot of times they're not the same.
True.
So I think there is a lot of cultural influence, absolutely. But for me, again, I was not raised in the church. My religious tradition and fallibility was underscored. So coming to the tradition, I had a different mindset already. Winston Churchill and God's positions are completely confused oftentimes on the British public. Is it Winston Churchill
Because you
and
have
God, or
a state
the other way
church.
around? And Winston Churchill's a really great chap, but he was a reporter for the British Army during the Boer War, where the British Army put women and children behind barbed wire and started starving them because they could not beat the Boers. And it wasn't Winston Churchill who was acting as a reporter who reported this. It was a woman from England who'd heard rumors, who came down, witnessed it for herself, packed her bags, moved back to Parliament, and that's when it stopped. They were concentration camps. And so, and it makes people really uncomfortable. We love Winston Churchill. It's like, you cannot speak ill of that man. But it's like, I don't expect any man to not be without sometimes very serious flaws.
But not women, right?
Never women. Never women. No.
That's why we need them in Mauritius.
Well, it's like Boudica. I mean, she didn't savage the Romans until after they'd savaged her people, and then off she went and go Romans. Beware the wrath of women. So it's fine as long as we don't raise our wrath.
Someone had a mic, or you have no, you need the mic though. Can't speak with, now you gotta have the mic close to your mouth.
Thank you.
There you go.
I fully appreciate the distinction between culture and the restored gospel, and I think it's helpful for me to recognize a third layer, perhaps in between those two, which would be the institution. I think the institution of the church is, the goal is to protect the greatest number of people in the most effective ways. And to me, it's kind of like traffic laws. It makes sense when you apply them to the general public, but when you're driving and the speed limit doesn't really make sense, or coming to a complete stop at the stop sign or whatever. I think it's helpful to maybe think in terms of the institution so that we can maybe not take it so personal when policies or pronouncements are made, which just don't seem to fit me personally.
That is absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That is really lovely.
Are you approving running stop signs?
I do it all the time. Talk to Terrell. He's done it once. It did not work out well.
Madison, did you? Oh, okay. Yes. Take that mic.
Yeah, it's kind of related. This idea of fallibility, that, okay, we know our leaders are imperfect and they're human. And when I disagree with them, I come, and I'll say, well, I don't agree with this. They're human, they're fallible. Then people will say, well, if all of us just kind of disagree, we're not going to have a united thing. So,
Hold the mic a little closer.
So I'm kind of getting to the point of what do you do when leaders make a mistake? You know it's wrong. You know they're fallible. But then people say, well, if we all kind of march to the beat of our own drum, we won't have this institution. The scriptures show us tons of prophets. Church history shows us tons of prophets who got it wrong. So I don't know what to say to people when they say, well, the prophet will never lead us astray. God won't let them make mistakes. And it's like, it happens all the time. And I don't agree with this. So I'm not going to follow that. I know they're wrong. And then they tell me, yeah, well, if everyone just, you get my point. So I don't know what to say to people when they say, we can't all be marching to the beat of our own drum, relying on our own personal interpretation.
That's a very, very good comment. Okay, so Shakespeare was also a prophet, just so that you know that you can read his works and just be sure that you're in very safe hands.
So is
But-
Brene Brown. So in
Yeah,
my book.
exactly. Yeah, she's fantastic. And it's in Hamlet, and it's Polonius who's like the most vile character in that play. And he says, above all, to thine own self be true. Thou canst not then be false to any man. So I think it is the nature of our lives, and our lives in any faith tradition, is to walk according to our own conscience, but then also be part of a community. And we can be part of a community in so many different ways. But for me, this idea that God will not allow, that's antithetical to the way God works in the first place. So yes, God will allow, because he can't do otherwise. He cannot force, he cannot impress very strongly. That's the job of the Holy Spirit. And revelation comes, but that revelation is never injurious to an individual or to the community. So for me, I have a few basic, God is good, God is kind, God will never destroy, God will not hurt, God will not harm. Section 121. God will never coerce. And that is a trap for authority. And it's right there in section 120, beware. And so for me, those are the guidelines. It's like I have to be true to myself. If I feel that myself is being influenced by the Holy Spirit. Now, if I go out and kill someone, then you can just assume it's a mental disorder and I need treatment immediately.
That's what happened to Nephi and when he chopped up. He had a mental disorder.
Yeah, trauma.
Past trauma.
Yeah. And then it was trauma after that. But no, absolutely. And we have to be true to the God we have come to embrace and to love. And for me, that God is absolute goodness. So in those paradigms, in those parameters, I navigate those very difficult waters, and sometimes not successfully. I crash and burn along with everybody else. So I don't know if that's helped. It's difficult. There's no easy way.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's been high leadership that have said some of those statements that get parroted back to you, right? Mm-hmm. And so they have a great weight of authority, and it's hard to, like you say, hard to come back. But I love what Fiona said. I think that's how I've had to operate my life. Once I figured out my life, sort of figuring out still. But, yeah, well said. Do we have one question that
We
you
might have-
think would be good to have from the virtual audience?
Tom Roberts has his hand raised, so he might.
Okay, let me read one of his. He came with 4, if you remember, Tom, as I sent you his. One that related, and I think will relate best to this audience. And we've talked around a little bit. In your view, does the restoration follow a non-corporate awakening for all those who seek further truth? Outside the corporate borders, can those believers be in the restoration as well, as D&C 10:48-55 seems to indicate? Is it right to reduce the body of Christ to a corporate identity? Now, if you don't know Father Tom, he's, was it 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a year or 2 more, joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he's been a Catholic, is it Catholic priest? Tom, I have to. He's trained as a priest in a very traditional, beautiful tradition, and he was familiar with all the things that many of you are in our church history that cause difficulty with people staying in the church, and yet he still entered into this community, and he's been welcomed by many and not welcomed by all. And he continues to, while being an active member of our faith, continues to minister to people in his own faith. Much as Fatima, who spoke, a few weeks ago here, has a great love and affection for the faith that she joined many years ago, but is a minister in a small Christian congregation. And I love that idea. And I think God calls people to do that. And it's completely, I guess we're again kosher. It's good with God. I think it's a beautiful thing.
No, Tom, thank you. The passages that you referred to, which you referred, are probably the most important for me. So we have this conversation about the lost pages, and then what did I tell you? Verse 52. Wake up. And then suddenly Christ shifts his attention completely to another audience, and says, "And now behold, according to their faith in their praise, will I bring this part of my gospel to the knowledge of my people. Behold, I do not bring it to destroy." So that is massive, but to build up what they have received. And for this cause have I said, if this generation harden not their hearts, I will establish my church among them. Now, I do not say this to destroy my church. What church? He's not referring to our church. Our church hasn't been established yet. He's speaking about another church. I'm assuming it's a universal church, but it's a church, and he's addressing them. I do not say this to destroy my church, but I say this to build up my church. Therefore, whosoever belongeth to my church need not fear, for such shall inherit the kingdom of God. Universalism. It's right there. It's plain. It's everybody who lives the second commandment. Everybody who lives the baptismal covenants, whether they have covenanted to them or not. And there are millions of people around the world doing exactly this. They are Christ Church. And so for me,
some of them aren't even Christian. They don't even believe in Christ.
No. And so when we have this scripture, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess, I've always looked at that through a liege lord vassal relationship. And then I realized God is not sovereign. I said, okay, look at this again, Fiona. Every knee shall bow and every tongue, that's a vassal liege lord relationship. But then I realized that this is a moment of recognition, a moment of awakening for people to say, I knew you by the name Allah. I knew you by the name Muhammad. I knew you by this name. And now I see you are also called Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God. And it's a universal acknowledgement that Jesus is the Christ. And it's not forced, it's a recognition by the whole global community And so of course, in reverence, we would bow, not out of fealty, not out of compulsion, but out of recognition that there is something truly beautiful who stepped into humanity's life, who suffered with them, who bled with them. Oh, and it's Alma. Oh, I've got to go back to this. Oh, I love Alma. Let me see. Is it all right? May I,
Please.
I don't know if to conclude with this, but I just love this. 7. It's just so emphatic. And he shall go forth, suffering pains and afflictions and temptations of every kind. And this, that the word might be fulfilled, which saith, he will take upon him the pains and the sicknesses of his people. And he will take upon him death, that he may loose the bands of death which bind his people. And he will take upon him their infirmities, that his bowels may be filled with mercy according to the flesh, that he may know according to the flesh how to succor his people according to their infirmities. That's extraordinary.
Where are you reading from?
It's Alma
Alma
7, 11, and 12. It's just so powerful.
It's been one of my touchstones too.
Yeah, he doesn't save us from sins. It's not there.
Right.
It's suffering, and that I will understand exactly how they feel. I will become fully
Yeah.
human.
And so,
Extraordinary.
so I think if we extend that right to our baptismal covenant, which you mentioned in Mosiah 18, where it talks about what that covenant is, where we mourn with those that mourn. You lift up the hands that hang down, strengthen the feeble knees, all those things. I like what, did you say it? Meister Eckhart? Was that how you say his name? Meister
Yeah.
Eckhart?
Eckhart.
Meister Eckhart. You know, he said, it's not, I'm paraphrasing, it's not enough to follow Christ. We need to become Christ. And to me, that is, so not only do we look to Jesus and Buddha and all these beautiful people, but we also hopefully can look to each other and see the divinity within each other, the potentiality of godhood, and that is often not well expressed. It's not in me, at least. But as we see that, then it is much harder, right, to demonize and to be cruel and to harm. And it's more likely we're going to ask hard questions when we're confronted with a politician or a religious leader that has certain strictures about how they believe things should be. And we go, well, but that's destroying, that's harming people, that's not of God. And so I don't want to be a part of that. I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but I love, this is probably a good place to, so say whatever you would like to say to kind of close us out, because we are out of time. To wrap it all up.
I think that's why we have our community. For me, I think that's where I have experienced Christ-like love from members of my community, where I have been uplifted and edified, where I have been taught to forgive and acknowledge that insofar as I forgive and am forgiven. And is it right if I end with this story? I'm a really unforgiving person. We invited some friends years ago to have dinner with us. And
I'm sorry, could you go for the mic?
oh, I'm
Yeah, you want
like,
to talk louder?
yeah, I'll talk louder. I'll project. I'll get my experience.
Get your actress mode on.
We invited friends to dinner, and I have massive anxiety, thanks to my mum, about preparing food, whether it's, simple or complicated. I went complicated, so my anxiety levels just went through the roof, and they forgot dinner. They never came, and I never forgave her. And Terrell said, "Oh, Fiona, we can do it again." And I said, "No, we're not. Not ever doing this again. I'm never going to speak to that woman again." I'm really showing what sort of person I am. certain person we've invited. And then years passed, and she knew, somehow she knew that I had not forgiven her. So a couple of years ago, they came to visit. And they were brave enough to ask if they could come to dinner, or I had forgotten enough to say, would you like to come to dinner? By now I was doing everything in a crock pot. So it wasn't, probably not going to be a disaster. And they arrived and we had this very pleasant dinner. And then she and I got up from the table together and she burst into tears. And she said, I am so sorry. And I held her close and I said, I have forgiveness to ask of you. Please forgive me. And in that moment, there was forgiveness of one being forgiven and one giving. And Terrell has this beautiful principle that we progress in so far as we are capable of forgiving. So there are now many persons one does not expect to be behind the veil, who are right behind the veil and are not dashing off and doing, because there are lots of people of whom they need to ask forgiveness. And we can immediately think of people in our own lives who have been injurious in our lives. But I love that. And I think this is what you were saying, is that Zion cannot be created, a celestial Zion cannot be created except under these conditions. Got nothing to do with sin, nothing to do with any of the other things, is our ability to forgive. And that is probably the hardest, at least for me. I mean, really, how ridiculous. She forgot dinner. Oh gosh, it speaks very ill of me, and truthfully. But I hope I'm learning. But that has really struck with me because of that. It's like, Fiona, you're not going anywhere unless you ensure that you have forgiven everyone of the hurt that they have. That's really hard to do. Did that have anything to do with it?
It has everything to do with everything. It's the love of God, right? Forgiveness is, that's what we all hope from God.
Oh, Jay, you
From
are
each
the
other,
most
so-
generous, lovely person. Thank you.
Jay, would it be possible for me to address Fiona for just a moment?
We're 5 minutes over time, Tom. I'll ask Fiona and
It depends, Tom. Are you going to say something nice or not?
not too long.
I'll definitely say something very nice, because we've been trying to connect for quite a while. And
Well, Tom, can you email me? Because I am concerned that we are out of time. Can you email me or call me? Would that be
Certainly.
possible?
certainly. And Jay, I just want you to know my relationship with the ward who didn't understand our conversion when we moved ended up to be so loving. When we moved and they heard a few more messages from me, the elders quorum asked me lots of questions, and we cried together, and the relationships, they were just a matter of, they didn't understand what was taking place in our lives. Once they did, the love flourished.
I love hearing that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tom, and thank you for being here.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you.
you're welcome, Fiona. I will hope we can get to Salt Lake and get together. And we're in Wyoming now. We're only 200 miles away. So
Well,
I have a lot of things we
yeah.
can talk.
I mean, that we're talking about Western miles. People do that every day.
Yeah.
So they can
Yes,
come
they
to you. They can come to you, absolutely. Thank you, Tom, for your lovely.
Thank you, dear. And your writings made it easier for me to become a Latter-day Saint from the old priesthood that I still represent. So I just say I have the best of both worlds.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you both.
So Tom broke up a little bit there, but he said the books from Terrell and Fiona helped him as he entered into our faith, feel more comfortable. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been so good to be with you. I appreciate, and I'm sorry we couldn't field more questions. I'm sure there's more questions. Hopefully we hit some of the most challenging things. And if you have a moment, maybe people can chat afterwards. let's, as we usually do, close out with a hymn. I asked her favorite hymn and, or at least one of her favorite hymns. And it was,
See, I should be jumping in and telling you what it is now.
it's okay.
forget.
If you're me, I wouldn't remember. That's why I wrote it down.
Good, I'm so glad. It's gonna come.
Hymn 220, Lord, I would follow thee. So if you want to bring that up on your phone. And who has a voice that could lead us out? Anybody want to volunteer on that? It would not be me. You're pointing to somebody.
Oh, you ran me out.
Right here.
Oh, please, come up. Please, come up. Yes. What, so raise your hand when you get the hymn up. Who's got the hymn?
221.
221?
220.
220. Yeah, it should be 220. Lord, I would follow thee, right? No, how many verses are there?
4.
Let's do 4. It's, you know, if you sometimes only do 1, then you miss some really important things later on. So let's do all this. Is everybody pretty much ready? Is that gonna be too high? That's pretty high.
Can we lower it?
That is the key.
You're right.
We can do it. Just do this.
Even higher.
I took it down a little for us. What do you guys want to know?
Your note, your note.
Yes. Let's
We
do
can
that.
do that.
Okay. We're,
Okay. Which do you want to do? The real key or my key?
Let's do it.
let's just do whatever you.
Right there. Here we go.
Savior, may I thirst without thee, walk the path that thou hast shown. Us to help and lift up other, finding strength beyond my own. Say, to love thee, Lord, I would follow thee. Who am I to judge another when I walk imperfectly? In the quiet heart is hidden sorrows that the eye can see. Who am I to trust? Lord, I would follow thee. I be my brother's keeper. I would learn my needless heart. To the wounded and the weary, I would show a gentle heart. I will be my father's keeper, Lord, I would follow thee. Say, may I love my brother as I know thou lovest me. Find in me my strength, my beacon, for thy servant I would be. Savior, may I love my brother, Lord, I would follow thee.
What was your name?
Nina.
Nina, thank you so much. You got Lovely job. I've asked Catherine Sontag. Your maiden name has escaped me all of a sudden. What night? Thank you, Catherine. Knight Sontag. You would have a microphone, maybe, or just come up here. Why don't you sit here? That would be good. So we can see you. Offer the benediction. Just real quick, I want to thank my lovely wife for her wonderful ongoing support. When I started this almost 10 years ago, she was an active member, and then, you know, on her own faith journey, started wandering in the wilderness, and she's on her completely separated journey now from the church. But she continues to support me, and I appreciate that as I try to support her in what she's chosen.
Our Father in heaven, we thank thee with our hearts this evening for the chance we've had to be gathered, to open our questions and our hearts to thee, and to have comfort and peace answered. We're grateful that through each other we feel thy love, and it binds us together. And we're so grateful for Fiona and the spirit that she's provided in this discussion, for the space that has been created to ask questions and to sit with discomfort. We thank thee with all of our hearts for Jesus Christ and for our Mother in heaven. And we ask that our hearts may remain open and vulnerable and seeking. And we say this with gratitude in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thanks so much, everyone. A few good souls brought some treats that you can partake of if you'd like.
Okay, I would like to ask you questions. Go ahead. I was just gonna say,
We would love to see the room if that could turn the computer around.
You get a good view there, hopefully. I wish you could be here. Pardon?
Upwards of 80. Plus people who are in the room. So.
Thank you for being here.